Okay, here we are with my newest GMT order. Weimar Republic. Newest and very old. This was on the P500 for a hell of a long time, if I recall correctly. I might be wrong. By the way, I just saw the tiniest fawn bounced up that. I startled it a couple of times. Bounced up that way, then bounced across that way. I think it's looking for its mother, but really little guy. Yeah. Anyway, and nowadays I might not be picking up a game like this right off the bat because I have so many damn games that I look at something and I'm like, oh, I don't recognize the design or whatever. So I think this is from further back by quite a bit, but it's taken a long time to get through the P500 or development process or whatever. I have a penchant for political games. I don't know, we got Prime Minister here. I have a lot of election games kicking around. I have Democker, which everybody seemed to think, everybody in the Euro world seemed to think was great. I'm trying to find it here. That should be down here. But I have a number of these races that are based on the 1960 kind of CDG style election. I have Road to the White House down there, which is a very, very detailed dealing with issues and as well as and very good for the primary process. I'm looking for Democker. It's got to be down here. It just has to be. But this is such a mess as opposed to the war games and stuff. One of my favorites, well, actually, no, let's leave that alone for a while. A landslide up there. I've got Mr. President up here somewhere. Both Mr. Presidents, but the one is upstairs because it's more of a geopolitical game than really an election game. But I've got here, this one. I have another copy of that. I had to pick a copy of it up when I saw one. I don't know where Democker is. Democker did not impress me. I have Bull Moose. I think that's... Or no, that's the California Gold. Yeah, that's California Gold. I got Bull Moose somewhere kicking around. I think that may be upstairs. Divided Republic should be here as well somewhere. I really ought to collect. I really ought to rearrange this. There's Democker. I really ought to rearrange all this. It's hard because my shelves are kind of not holding together very well. Anyway, why am I showing all that? The game that this most is called, I have Canadian Civil War, which is another political one. The game this is most like is Der Führer in terms of the topic. This is similar to that, but Der Führer is kind of set in just like that early 30s election period where the Nazis came into power. This covers from 1919 to 1933, and one of the problems I have with Der Führer, Democker I don't think represents electoral politics in Germany, modern ones, well. I don't remember what my criticisms were of it, but I know I looked stuff up and was not happy with what it did. Der Führer doesn't really differentiate between the different parties very well. Neither does Democker, but that's besides the point. But this one makes a significant effort to show the differences in the parties. Now, most of those political games, Der Führer and Canadian Civil War accepted, got political games too, like Kingmaker and Blood Royale, where you might have elections, parliamentary action going on, but it's not the focus of the game. The Now I'm getting lost. One of the things that is particular about this period and in Germany is that violence was an option in politics. And in fact, it was more than an option. It was a part of the process. It wasn't supposed to be, but it makes for a more interesting type of representation. And it's something that like Divided Republic probably should have had, because there was violence going on impacting the electoral process, but not everywhere. But in 1920s and 30s, well, Germany, you had serious political, militant arms of the political parties, as it were. And given that Der Fuhrer just doesn't quite do it for me, everybody's playing kind of by the same rules, except the Nazis and the communists have a couple of special rules for them. But it's basically like, I think it's a 6-player game, to be honest. But most of the parties are pretty much the same. They may each have one little special rule, and then they kind of compete in the same way in a lot of ways, except that, like, again, the Nazis are allowed to kind of cheat by using the big lie. But anyway, it feels like everybody's kind of operating on the same plane. This one has a significant difference from that. First of all, because it's covering a larger period, it's not just handling that sort of rise of the Nazis at the end, where they were a significant power. It starts with them very, very weak. They're actually more of sort of just the milieu of the far right parties at the time, and kind of a strange one in a lot of ways. So here you have the coalition. Now, some of these are indeed coalition parties. The coalition and the radical conservatives essentially are groupings, and you could pretty much say the Nazis were a part of the radical conservatives at this point. Just one with extremely radical views, even very early on. Although I don't think Hitler's a member of the party in 1919. He kind of takes it over relatively quickly, to be honest. But it's kind of a local party and whatnot. Anyway, the coalition is things like the Christian Democrats. These are the people who want the Weimar Republic, which honestly had one of the most democratic constitutions ever. You can see where something like that goes wrong, right? It had a very liberal, very democratic constitution. These were the people who formed the basis of the government, while the more conservative elements were either boycotting the process because they wanted the monarchy back, or so disorganized and licking their wounds after the war, etc. I think there basically was a kind of a little revolution, after the Kaiser abdicated, and this is the government that kind of formed out of that, and it was a very progressive, liberal, wanting to create a welfare state type of situation, to make sure that everybody was well taken care of, and that there were essential reforms to the former autocratic rule. Let's ignore the Nazis for a little bit. Now, the advantage the coalition has is they kind of are the whole government at this point. They're the people who bought into the government. You might have electoral differences between them and elections that parties that count as the coalition for the breadth of the game, honestly, in the early part of it, are fighting one another more than anything else because they have they have such a solid political party power. This is not a situation like when you see things like the Democrat Party fragmenting at the beginning or just before the Civil War, or for that matter, the Whigs falling apart completely or something like that. This isn't that kind of struggle. It's not a solid singular party. It's a number of different parties that in general favor that liberal democracy and certain reforms without going into the Communist Party. And you could not do this without the Communist Party. So one of the advantages the coalition has is they have parliamentary control of all the regions in the game. They control the government, which is represented by this Article 48, which is going to allow them to cancel any event, become the momentum faction, and then something called conduct a clean slate, which is really just a mechanical task that clears out a bunch of crap off the board. Now, the coalition has these Freikorps, which may or may not be loyal to them. And they have a unity level, which at the beginning of this scenario will start at sound, but it can move up to strong. This is every power, every player in the game has one of these, which is basically a victory declaration situation on them. The unity of the party is important. Like I said, it's a coalition of various factions, and this is, how much they're willing to work together as opposed to how much they're being pried apart. You can see they have a lot of control markers here. These little cubes, the orange ones, are their political power in various different areas of the country. Because they are the government, they more or less control what deals are made with both the US and the USSR, which can influence the economic facets of the game. They can also directly influence the economy, and they want to keep it stable. They don't want to move it towards hyperinflation nor towards mass unemployment. At the beginning of the game, they start with the momentum, which will give them control over the turn order that the different players take care of. They own the progress track, which influences the reaction track. This is essentially reforms that they're putting in place, but it costs them political and economic leverage. They have to do things to be able to achieve this progress. You'll see they have bonuses that come based on their progress. Also, as this moves up, they become capable of competing for middle class support, or sympathies, as they say. We have the communists, like I said. Oh, we not only have the Freikorps here, but we actually have, this is the actual army, which would also be under the coalition's control. Now, the game presupposes, or the game is predicated on, if anyone wins a general election other than the coalition, the game is over, and that person won. Sort of, kind of. They might not, but... Okay. We have the communists. The communists have, these are like union thugs and communist foot soldiers and whatnot that are going to be in the street fighting. They have the capability to generate strikes. This is all based on what their stance is. running between being fully democratic and working within the system of the Constitution to being fully revolutionary. Now, in order to win the game, they need to create a revolution. And they have that counter to indicate that they're creating it. They also have some cadres, which are very important towards creating sort of centers of power for them. And they achieve additional power through deals with the Russians. They have a fair amount of political power throughout the board. They don't have much control over the economy directly. You have the radical conservatives. These start out really as, hey, we want the monarchy back. But what they really want is a strong autocratic government. They want to get rid of a lot of the more democratic measures that the Constitution actually includes. They probably would change it significantly, just as Hitler did. They're very much, again, this is the umbrella that Hitler's hiding under, essentially, or that the Nazi Party is hiding under. They have Freikorps of their own. Now, some of these Freikorps, some of which are on the map, are disloyal. And on the other side, they will indicate who their loyalty is. And the radical conservatives have capabilities that will allow them to expose whether or not a Freikorps unit is loyal or not. The Freikorps are kind of a way of getting around the regular army being so limited by the Treaty of Versailles. I wish that little deer would come by again. They have their track here, their economic influence track. As they remove leverage from here and put it elsewhere on the board, which gives them, some kind of functionality on the board, then they free up these additional capabilities as well. By the way, everyone's got these middle class sympathy spaces where they put these pawns. Those become available. You can grab them, whatever. So the first couple of leverages give them these big cubes. Now, or not cubes, but squares, blocks, whatever. Strangely, there are 3 of them that are just counters and 3 of them that are wooden blocks. I don't know if the counter ones are different, like are used for the bots version of the game, but they have these which act as centers of power and expansion, kind of like the cadres do. They get capability eventually to conduct assassinations, which they probably, I think they must, place against coalition or communists. And then finally they have the pooch, which you do not want to screw, which again, that's their victory marker. The way the game works is, as an action, you put down a marker saying, I'm going to win. And if you meet the victory conditions when you reach that marker on the turn track, you win. And if you don't, you get the marker back and you get the opportunity to, as an action, put it on the board again. That works for all the countries, for all the factions in the same way. The radical conservatives don't have the kind of, nor do no one except the coalition really has all the kind of tools and power that the coalition has, but the radical conservatives do have the capability to play around with the reaction track. If they put leverage in here, now they're limited, they can only be 1 higher than the progress track. As more and more liberal reforms come on, there's a reactionary backlash. Boy, that sounds familiar. And that opens things up as well for them. This opens up reforms for the coalition here. It's another assassination shit. A couple of cadres for the Nazis that we'd be opening up, and then finally another one of these cliques. I've got to swap batteries. Let me talk. Oh, yeah, I've got to. Now, the radical conservatives, I think, are the third most powerful of the political parties. They had quite a bit of power at the beginning of this period, and they have the capability to have a lot more. Everybody's got a decent amount of cubes. By the way, the game comes with components and whatnot. Extra pieces. I think there's one extra of each cube, as well as one extra popular support and one extra click block. GMT does this with their wooden blocks and whatnot. They give you an extra piece for each thing. I'm not absolutely certain that I have the right number of all of them. I counted the Nazis. They had exactly one extra cube. I figure everybody's got one extra cube. That's usually what GMT does. But anyway. And I'm glad of it because one of my games lost a cube. Not a GMT game, but a game that I actually really like. Baltimore and Ohio. No, B&O it's called, I think, right? No, it's called Baltimore and Ohio. Okay. I'm thinking... Anyway. I get the two confused. I don't own B&O. Or is it B&O and C&O? I don't know. But, yeah, going to... what were we at? Yeah. We're at the reaction track, but then there's also, the radical conservatives also have some capability to fuck around with the economy. And basically, fuck around with it is the right thing. They're basically using their leverage to prevent the coalition from being able to stabilize the economy properly. Or maybe not. But the main thing that they do, the effect of their leverage is to prevent the economy, prevent the coalition from being able to move the economy in a given direction. Whereas the coalition itself gets to move these markers to try to keep the economy towards the center by pushing things around. And then finally we get to the Nazis, who have a bunch of stormtroopers here. Not on the board yet. The SA hasn't even been formed as far as I know. They also have a stance. It starts out as revolutionary, like with the communists. They're much more... Basically, those are the factions willing to accept a revolution to change things. Whereas the radical conservatives want to just basically throw a putsch, a coup, you know. We have cadres here that are available to us, but only if I think we're to the right of them. Yeah, well, we're to the right of them. The more democratic the Nazis are willing to be, the less they're able to form those more militant organizations. And then at the far end, they get an assassination capability like the conservatives do. And again, it has the same targeting ability. The communists eventually get an assassination. Where the hell's theirs? We know they're able to assassinate people too. I don't know where theirs sits on here. I'm not seeing anything that generates it. But anyway, they're able to assassinate members of the far right. But I don't see counters for it. I just did the setup yesterday, but I had to finish up my Elric game. And then finally they have their victory counter, the putsch. The only way you can get these victory counters for the people who have one of these stance tracks is to get it all the way to revolutionary. The radical conservatives, very different. They're like, yep, We'll coup. Let's look at things that we haven't explained yet. Turn record track. This is given to the person who wins second in a general election. This is a sequence of play within a turn. We have a little election step here, which sends us through different elements that we have to follow. So we follow the little arrows. We might go this way, we might go this way. If we go this way, we go back up. We go to here. We might have to deal with the economy. Or we do have to deal with the economy. Then we have to figure out the turn order. Then we see if we're in a new era. And all the different elements there. A list of all the different regional elections that happen within an election cycle. That's just really, it's not like anything happens in between these different things. So it's really just an ordering that the elections happen in for convenience as far as I can see. We have the board locations themselves, where here we have the population of each location. So things are a little divided up oddly. So we have individual states, which are these large pieces that operate on their own. But then we have northern, southern states and Prussian provinces, all of which operate the same way for a lot of things, but some of the cards, etc., are going to deal with them by that different coloring. And then we also have cities, which also have a population. The other number in these is their political value. That's what you get for winning them. We have little markers to indicate adjacency, but adjacency is also indicated by just pushing a city into a location in that sort of way. And we have a box for continuing events that happens. This is going to be a track used in the elections. Usually it's used for a couple of other things, where you just count up the political power everybody has, and then you apply that to determine the winners of the election. There's a shitload of cards. They're divided by eras. I haven't opened them all. We'll talk about some of the counters that are on the map. So, trying to remember. Yeah, okay. So control counters are used for who controls that section. So this is the southern states. All the southern states cluster together, getting control of them. That gives you this card. This card gives you functionality that you can take advantage of. And when you do, you flip it over, and you, at the end of the next election, it will be handed to the new winner of that region, and flip back up so that they can use it once in the period. Here are our different decks of cards. Everybody's going to start with 7 cards at the beginning of it. We'll worry about the cards a little later. I shuffled them, so I don't really want to show them, but they're basically just pure event cards. Now, some of them are mandatory. They'll have an M on them. That means, what does it mean? It means you can't discard it, and it means that you will pay a higher penalty if you don't play it. Some are lingering, they'll have an L on them. They show up here. Some of them have the number 48 on them. That's for bots, but I'm gonna use that as a guide for whether or not the coalition really wants to play this card. They're allowed to play this card once, like these, once in an election period, and again it flips over. Now they're the only player who ever gets this, because remember what I said, if anyone else ever wins a general election, the game's over. And let's see. Oh yeah, we had these. So the control markers go into these locations to indicate who gets the card. At the beginning, it's all the coalition. Supremacy counters indicate where you have military supremacy, i.e., your thugs control the street better than anyone else in that area. They all start the game in cities. I don't know if they're only allowed in cities. It doesn't look like that would be the case, because there's quite a few coalition and communist ones. And then on the back, we have the other sides. We have these things that say no supremacy. I'm not sure what they're for. They may be just, you put them everywhere where there's no supremacy. Well, I don't know if that really helps me see. I mean, I don't know. It feels a little weird. It might have something to do with the bots. There are a lot of extra counters, though. These white ones. And then again, these cliques. For some reason, I don't know if they're meant to replace these or not. It didn't really say that I read. Okay. Before we go any further, let's talk about other components. First of all, there are bots in the game. You can play the game without having any players. Just run the bots against each other. Each faction is allowed to be played by a bot. I don't know how interesting it would be to just watch them play. Might be. It's an interesting... I'll say one thing about it. I might end up doing it in order to learn. There is the rulebook itself, which felt like it made sense to me, but it is a relatively large rulebook. It's not huge. It's, I don't know, 30 pages. And then we hit the bots, which adds another 15 or so pages of complexity to the game. A little less than that. I don't know that the bots are fully spelled out in terms of, it feels like there are some cases where you'll just roll a die to make a decision among things that the bot could choose or whatever. But they're meant to provide a little bit of extra friction in a game where you wouldn't have 4 people to play. Now, I don't know. I don't think I would play this in other than 4 players, simply because, well, certainly Solitaire, I'm going to play it in 4 players. But I tend to pick my games based on the number of players I have. So, like, I don't think I'd be like, oh, I really want to play this game, even though we don't have enough players. It's very similar to like a coin game or something where you're supposed to have 4 players. Well, I'm going to play it in 2, you know? Actually, I have, but that was because somebody really, really wanted to play a distant plane. And the bots also have cards in here that function to help guide them in addition to the simple the actual cards that you flip over for what the bot does. They also have little play aids that help them. But for the regular game, you have I think there's 2. Wait a minute. I may not have everything I need out here. I thought there were 2 player aids. No. Okay. Yeah. I got it. So there's 1 player aid, gives you the sequence of play. And then on the back, some of the mechanisms in it, the elections, what a clean slate actually cleans up, how combat works in the game. There are other ways of conflicting without combat. And then 3 concepts. Presence is just you have a cube in a region. Dominance is you have more influence than any other single faction. I really wish they worded it that way, than more influence than each other faction. I guess it makes the same sense, but I don't know. It just feels stronger. And supremacy is you have more military points than any other single faction. Now, military points are, on the military units, the little number. So right here, the coalition has 4, the radical conservatives have 2, the communists have 1, the Nazis have nothing, so the coalition has a supremacy marker. That's going to allow them more capabilities in the region, because the thugs are theirs. Hey, they're Freikorps, so you know they're semi-legal. It's soldiers who aren't governed by the Versailles Treaty when it comes down to it. Okay. Then each player has their own action list, some of which are very much the same, and these are going to be the functions that they do within the game. On their own turn, each time they get a turn, they have the option to play one of their cards. They don't have to. If they don't play a card, they can take 1 action or pass. And I believe they're allowed to discard if they pass. If they play a card, they're allowed to take 2 of their actions. And a lot of the game is going to be zoning out on these, just like with the coin games. They have similar functionality, but there's little differences in how it all works out. In addition to the rule book, which contains the bots, you have the playbook. Has a series of different scenarios, including a very small one that's used as a tutorial, doesn't even use all of the rules, and then they do a playthrough of that. I did not read through it because I don't want to get used to playing the game without all the rules, basically. A set of historical and faction notes, which which I felt, I don't know, I felt like the history part was kind of limited, but then it gives you play information on it, which maybe is more important, and how you win, you know, what you need to do to set yourself up for the win. And that's a significant amount for each of the factions, so a fair amount of effort is put on that. But there's no broad history being given to you, which kind of a shame, but you know, you can find this history elsewhere. You don't have to find it in the book. What it doesn't go into is what all these things represent in very much connectivity. It gives you a couple of words on it, a sentence maybe, on what each thing represents. So like, you know, what the leverage is, it tells you it's economic and political pressure that you can put on various things. Okay, great. The designer's notes I found kind of sad. See, some of it feels kind of like a historical discussion, more than, which, you know, the general historical discussion was kind of missing. There's a very light level of it. But what it doesn't really feel like it does is it doesn't link the mechanisms and what some of the choices are. In particular, you know, why linking the US dollar why making deals and getting the U.S. dollar linked to the German mark, I guess, is particularly dangerous because it actually causes a problem on the economy track. It ends up causing mass unemployment. Probably through, what is it called? I don't know. Being a cheapskate in government. The word's just not coming to mind. I'm getting too old. Or why in particular you don't have an army unless you make deals with the USSR. Now, some of that was the USSR allowed, like, I know one of the things was they allowed tanks to be trained and developed and whatnot by Germany in Russia during this period. I don't know what all of the rest of it is, or what's going on here, why Russian deals create more radical conservative leverage. I can think of reasons for it, why the middle class is affected by these charts. Those are the kind of things I want to know in designer notes, and there's really no effort made to do that. There is a broad historical look at and possible what ifs and stuff like that, but not really linking us to what the chosen mechanisms were in this game. And which ones are kind of weird, Some of them appear very obvious, right? Like, I got cubes, that's my political influence in an area. If I have more of it, I get the political power of the area. That's all makes sense. But anyway, and then the other half of the designer's notes is like, why would you want to play a game where you might be the Nazis? Which to me is like, well, that's a fucking waste. Look, I'm not saying that there aren't people who need to read that to be convinced of the game, but you think they're going to buy the game and read it? This should be online as, part of your sales package or something. Okay, I could see I'm trying to convince my buddies to play the game, and somebody says, well, I don't want to play a game where I might be the Nazis, or I don't want to play a game where one of the players is the Nazis, as a party in particular. Or honestly, any of the, I'm not really convinced that, look, the Nazis have a horrible reputation, but this is a Stalinist infiltrated Russia Communist Party, okay? This is something that was not going to be aligning with the values of the West where this game is targeted at. This is a authoritarian aligned faction that isn't too much better than the Nazis in a lot of ways. They have significant anti-Semitism incorporated into some of the parties in it. But more importantly, they're willing to overthrow the Constitution in order to get their way. Maybe, It's not the only way they can win the game. Remember, if you win an election, the game is over. If somebody other than the coalition wins an election, the game is over, which generally will go to the person who won the election. Though it is possible that the Nazis can win the election and the radical conservatives have fooled them. Kind of seems like the opposite of the reality, but the reality is the Nazis won the election and were appointed and whatnot. Hitler takes power. That's actually just a card in it, though. And that they pulled the wool over the radical conservatives. I'm not really sure. This is trying to represent the thought that putting the Nazis in power, that they would be able to maintain control over them. Kind of like in Trump's first term, how many people who took positions in the cabinet or in his administration thought that they could, that he was basically moldable. Maybe he was in some ways, but, there were some things that he was just like, no, you're not letting me do this horrible thing that I want to do. And I absolutely want to do it. But anyway, yeah, I feel like that's kind of a waste. And then we have notes on all the event cards. This is useful in particular because there's some cards. Think here, what the hell is the game? I can't remember names of anything anymore. Words are failing me. My brain does not work anymore. The Ted race here, the big World War I, Paths of Glory. In that game, I had a real problem because there were things that you could not get the historical outcome if you didn't play prerequisite cards. Here, it improves on that. Both the prerequisite card and the card, the card that has a requirement lists what the prerequisite is. But the prerequisite card also lists what it'll allow you to play. That helps a lot. If you see something like in Paths of Glory, and maybe they fix this in later editions, but my edition does not have this. If they had things that said something like, allows rearmament to be played, I'd be like, oh, well, gosh, that's important to me, or allows trench warfare or something. There's something in that game that, I just ended up frozen and could not get a historical result because there was a card that I didn't particularly want to play because I didn't like what it did terribly much. And I wasn't at all aware that it was, a prerequisite for a much more important card. And then on that much more important card, I'm like, oh, well, that sucks. I played this card for points because I didn't like what it did. Yeah. So I'm trying to think where we are. I guess we're about ready to dive into the rules. I think a big part of this is going to be, again, zoning out on these and getting used to what these do. Very, very powerful. If you look at this, this has the sudden victory requirements that you have to manage to get to, if you put your little marker down, to be able to win the game. It's sort of a weird combination. You have to be in a position where you're allowed to put your marker down. For example, you have to have gotten this last leverage on the board, and then you will be allowed to put the pooch down. Isn't that what Kristen Nome got in trouble for? But then you look up and you look at this and you're like 4 middle class sympathies or 3 middle class sympathies and radical conservative supremacy in Berlin. So that will be your goal if you put this down in the time that you have before it hits. Now if we look here, we start with an action step. I think people take 1 card per half year, to be honest. But I'm not absolutely positive of that. The deck is constructed kind of oddly. All mandatory cards and all election cards are put in a section of the deck that is guaranteed to happen during the phase that you're in. And then the rest of the cards are still shuffled and put on below that. So, about half the deck or so is probably not going to get used. So you're not going to see all the events from a period, likely. That's my assumption. All right. We're going to break for now because all my batteries seem to be charged. But it's time to get into the rules, and I could use a break. The way I handle rules is I generally read through them with you on camera, and it's not necessarily the best way to learn things. It's helpful to me. I'm going to try not to do that too much on this one, but if anybody else is doing a rules introduction on this, you're better off learning from them. To some extent, when I do going through the rules, it's kind of a combing through them and trying to make sure, it's the process of how I learn, but it's also sometimes a lot of commentary and whatnot. So anyway, most of the components I've already gone through. I'm looking to see if there's anything I need to deal with. I haven't really gone through the cards entirely, but like I said, they have either an L or an M or special cases. The L being something that goes in the lingering box, which might time out. It might only last for one period or something. The M's being mandatories. Let me see. Which can never be discarded, but you are allowed to hold on to them. It's just they cost more. And then election cards, which also cost more. I don't think you're allowed to discard them either. Yeah, maybe you are. Interesting. These other cards I've already talked about. I haven't really gone into what you can do with them. They list what they can do. And I think it's the same in all of them. You get 3 actions, and then it flips over. Article 48 is a special case. Let me see if... Yeah, these are all the same. And the cities are too. Yeah. Okay. And we have a picture here. Why? Because we get a picture of the full setup. And this is a little small to really be useful. The setup is in the scenario book, but I ended up utilizing this a little bit, sometimes to see what particular things kind of look like. I can certainly zoom in with the camera and get a better view, but yeah. And you'll notice they're using these wooden squares rather than the counters. So again, those might be meant for the bots for some reason, but I don't know, they kind of don't look like it. All right, how can you win the game? Sudden victory. If you get your little sudden victory marker on the board, you reach that point in the turn, or in the game, and you have met the requirements, you win. General election victory. If anyone except for the coalition wins a general election, that faction generally wins the game. There is a special case on that, which we'll hit in a moment. Event card victory. Some event cards can allow someone other than the coalition to win the game. And then it's at the conclusion of the final turn of the scenario. So at which point you determine who wins that. And we'll talk about that in a moment. It looks to me like that's done by the scenario instructions. So it's not a guaranteed the coalition wins. Probably is in the full campaign, but I'm not positive. Okay. What are the different sudden victories? These are spelled out on here, so we can look at them there. But the coalition has to have 4 markers on the map, or 3 on the map when their unity is strong. Remember, the unity is over there. KPD needs 4 uprisings on the map, or 3 uprisings, and KPD has supremacy in Berlin. Supremacy means they have the military control of the city. Doesn't mean they have an army, it just means their rioters and whatnot have taken, control. The Nazis, the NSDAP, And we have that here. Win a sudden victory if they have more middle-class sympathy pawns on its faction mat than the RC does, and either supremacy in Berlin or supremacy in any 2 other cities. The RC wins a sudden victory if they have 4 or more middle-class sympathies pawns on its faction map, or there are 3 of them on its map and it has supremacy in Berlin. What do they mean to be on the map? On the map. Yep. We shall see. Because we don't remember. I did read these relatively recently, but one of the reasons I read through rules like this is it catches more there. Okay. During the general election step, special thing, if the NSDAP wins the general election, but at least half of their political value was transferred from the RC. The RC has basically managed to steal the election that the Nazis won. Seems like it's a hard thing to do, and we'll talk about, but people are able to hand off up to half their political value in an election. And depending on the ordering and whatnot, if you see someone handing off half of it to someone other than the coalition, you might want to be considering, I better make the coalition win. Unless they're handing it to you. But if they're handing it to you, you better think about that carefully too. So you might see the Nazis actually supporting the coalition to prevent the RC from getting an auto victory or whatever. But I believe that's going to be a function of the momentum as to what the order is that you force people to vote. But otherwise, other than that special case, if the coalition doesn't win the election, whoever won it wins the game. We're not going to be playing the Time for Revolution scenario, but that has a specific situation where it allows an election cycle. I'm not sure. This is one of those things I'd want design notes. And honestly, what I saw in the, I can't remember the company's name, VCU or whatever, the guys who did Knock Paris and Imperial Elegy, they tended to, and honestly, GMT as well with Baltic Empires. All 3 of those games tended to put a lot of notes in that made you understand why the game works the way it does, rather than embedding them all in the back in designer's notes. This game doesn't do that, unfortunately. It doesn't really have that information anywhere, and that saddens me a little bit. We have these gameplay notes. I don't remember a lot of historical notes. Okay, there are a couple of event cards that can end the game. The referendum, when this is played, as long as the RC is in momentum, they get a special election, and if they win this election, the game ends and the RC wins. 117 Hitler sworn in. When this card is played, there's a snap election. We'll go into those later. And that can be won just as if it's a normal election. And then the Enabling Act, 118, when this card is played, calculate the Nazi current political value, and if all of the following cases are true, they win. They have to be momentum. They have to hold the Reichstag seats card. There's not an election on this. And they have to have 15 or more political value. If no one's won, the scenarios themselves have a victory condition. Now let's look at what the main scenario is. So this is the tutorial. Here's the main one. A Time for Revolution. No. That's not the main one. The Black Sun Rises. Here it is. Scenario victory conditions. If no faction wins, general election victory or event card victory, the game will end with either a full election cycle or a coalition victory. If the coalition had any held card penalty in the last round, There's a regional election followed by a general election. That's the normal cycle. And whoever wins the general election wins the game, which could be the coalition. But if they didn't have a held card penalty, they win the game without having the election. And then we have a special rule in this, which is if there's a non-player coalition, i.e. a bot, they're prevented from winning a sudden victory in the first part of the game. It's probably easy for them. Well, no, I mean, if it's easy for them to do, then the player, like if you're playing a solo game with the coalition, it should be really easy. I don't know. Okay. What's the sequence of play? For each game year, first there's an action step, then a sudden victory, then you go through elections, advance the timeline. This is this whole thing here, but there is this advanced timeline. It follows here, but the election step might go into advanced timeline or it might go into the elections. And that's going to depend on whether an election card was played, I think. In the late year rounds, you play the new year step. Right now it's an early year. On the other side, it's late year. So there's 2 turns per year. And then in 23 or 29, you play a new era step because you're going to be replenishing or replacing the cards with the other decks. Okay, all makes sense. All right, the action step. One of these per turn. In turn order, each faction has one opportunity to do either an action, an event card in 2 actions, pass, and optionally discard and redraw a card on a pass. The sudden victory step, and we go into more detail later. Sudden victory step, whoever in turn order, you check each player who has the sudden victory marker on the timeline during the action step and check whether or not they met their sudden victory requirements. If they failed, if they meet their requirements, they win the game and nothing else happens. If they didn't, their sudden victory markers are removed. It's important these are done in turn order. If you win before somebody else goes, you win. They don't get a chance to tie you or anything. The election step, if an election card had been played, or if you're playing a specific scenario with an extra election, or if playing an, yeah, I think so. Conduct the regional elections followed by general election. Again, that process up there. And after that, if the game is still going, the momentum faction conducts what's called a clean sweep, which is just removing counters, honestly. You advance the timeline. The KPD may remove any strikes or uprisings from the map. This is the communist. You remove the general strike marker if there are now fewer than 3 total strikes plus uprisings on the map. Now, at the beginning of the game, there are none. If the economy map is at hyperinflation, the momentum faction removes 1 coalition influence from any space. These are the influences. You flip the turn marker over. If it's now in its late year, repeat the 4 first steps for the late year afterwards. If you're now on the early year, you advance the timeline into the next year and then go to the new year step, which is up there. Okay, the new year step, when that happens, you adjust the economy track. If it just entered 20, 21, 22, or 23 within the crisis era, the economy marker moves 1 space towards hyperinflation, unless yellow has prevented that by putting leverage markers to block it. If the turn marker just entered 1930, you put the economy marker below the rightmost occupied dollar dependence. So if you get all of these, these wouldn't be here. They'll be over in the economy track up here. So if the rightmost one is here, they're all filled, you would put it here. The momentum faction then removes all leverage from the economy track and returns those markers to the empty holding boxes. This is disturbing. I think this sentence only happens in 1930. If you enter 31, 32, or 33, within the decline, the economy marker goes one box towards mass unemployment, unless prevented by leverage. During the decline era, the economy marker may not shift further left towards hyperinflation than the rightmost dollar dependency. This is a big deal. If your dollar dependency is here, you're not forced into massive unemployment. But as it gets further and further, you're going to be in a worse and worse position in terms of where the coalition is. On the other hand, U.S. deals give them power. First two are free. Third one probably worth taking. Fourth and fifth, they sound scary. Okay. Adjust the turn order track. The momentum faction determines what the turn order is for the upcoming year. Basically, they just decide where to place these, first through fourth. I don't know which is better. I'm sure it's situational. I'm guessing it's usually best to move last. That's often the case, but getting the jump on something can sometimes be important, even in games where that is the case. The new era step. If you just entered a new era, 24 or 30, each faction has to reveal any held event cards that were not played during the last era. Now, you start with 7 cards. There are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 turns in that first era. So 7 of those turns, you probably want to play a card. We'll see why. Okay. So let's see. For each election or mandatory event that you hold, the momentum faction may remove up to 2 influence cubes belonging to that faction from any space on the map, and that faction draws 2 less cards when they get their new hand of cards. Hey, they weren't able to play all their cards, they deserve less. Remember, a card allows you to take 2 actions. So playing a card is generally a good thing. The only reason you're going to hold on to cards is because maybe because you have to hold it, because you're not allowed to play it, but I don't know about that. You might be able to play cards requiring prerequisites just to trigger your 2 actions. We'll have to see about that. I remember there's something kind of like that. For every other card, though, the momentum faction may remove 1 influence cube belonging to your faction from the map, and you draw 1 fewer card. So it's really horrible to hold mandatories or elections. You're doing something that would be very hard to do, to be honest. Okay. And, like here they give a design note. It's a play note. The other play note is like, the gameplay note here is actually like just a consequence, a corollary of what the rules are. This one is more of a real play note. Like, what are you going to do? What it's not is a design note. A design note would tell me what this represents, what the holding card penalty represents, and why it is that I'm able to prevent an election from happening, for example, at penalty. And, maybe a historical analog to that to let me understand better. Okay, then the era that's ending, if it has lingering events that are due to go away at the end of that era, they get removed from the game. But some can remain there all game. And then everybody gets new cards. All the previous era's deck and discards are removed from play, including any held cards, And you prepare the new deck. That's going to involve basically one big chunk of the deck being shuffled with the mandatories and election, and the rest of the deck being put under it because maybe you can draw some of them. I don't know. And in the golden era, in the first era, players get 7 cards each. In the golden era, they get 9 cards each, minus possible penalties from the held card. And in the decline era, they only get 6 cards each, minus penalties. Factions that held cards will have fewer cards. Yep. And then they have examples. They're good at putting examples in. Just not good at giving me, they won't tell me why the game is designed the way it is, why the mechanisms, what they're representing. I don't like that. I want to understand that kind of stuff. And I especially expect that in a game with a strong historical basis. And I think this one is. It certainly seems to have more so than Die Macher, although different periods, and it damn well better be more than Der Führer. Okay. Yeah, honestly, I don't know which. I think I like Der Führer. I believe Der Führer more than Die Macher. So, okay. It at least is a believable mechanism, just not a very detailed one. All right. So, many things I'll talk about available pieces. Pieces become available through different mechanisms. Most units and all influence cards are stored on or near the player's faction map. So for example here, all these SA counters are available. All these cubes are available. These cadres are only available if the stance is right. And same with these markers. The further to the right I am, the more shit I get. And each player has their own availability. Some of these things, they become available, and then you can place them if they're available during your actions. You have to take an action to do it. So for example, over here, there is a middle class, whatever it's called, sympathy, a white pawn, available. It is only available to the RC. They could take it as an action. Okay. So, yeah, these are the other pieces that come off of various holding boxes, which could be on the board or on the faction maps. Yeah, I've kind of combined them all there. Holding boxes are labeled available, and one specifies the name of a single piece or unit kept there. Each one has only one piece. Right. Available middle-class sympathy pawns on the progress and reaction track are available to all factions depending on the position of the progress and reaction markers. The progress marker determines the availability to the left-leaning coalition and KPD, communists, whereas the reaction track determines whether or not they're available to the RC or the Nazis. You know, they have RC Cola, right? Do they have Nazi Cola? Anyway. They're very similar. I used to like RC in a weird sort of way. Like, it was too sweet, but it was better than Pepsi, at least. Where are we? We have some example. We have an important. Okay, availability is different on the economic influence track on the RC faction. It's handled differently. The only place where it's different is the economic influence track on the RC faction map. That's this thing here. Now, the leverage marker in the lowest numbered box is always available. Whatever box, you know, this one's gone, so this one's available. If you take this one's available. Okay. As each leverage is used, the next one becomes available, but also that opens up these things underneath to be available for placement. Certain cards and all parliamentary control cards can be used only once between elections. Keep these cards face up. Utilizing one of these is an action, I believe. All other pieces are considered unavailable and may not be placed until released by their connected track. Pieces that have already been placed are not affected when the track that owns them that governs their availability ends up shifting. You don't lose your pieces, but if they end up going back there, you're going to have to set the conditions again to trigger them. Generally, pieces on a faction mat are only available to that faction. Middle-class sympathy pawns on a faction's mat, however, are available to other factions via move middle-class sympathy actions, although only the Nazis can move them directly from an opponent's faction to their own. Many other pieces are color-coded and can only be used by the matching faction. Assassination, however, are color-coded according to the factions targeted by the NSDAP and RC place assassination actions. Yeah, maybe the communists don't have assassins. I thought they did. See, this can be placed this side up, but that may be the more conservative factions shooting each other. That's what it seems to be here. I thought the communists could play in that game too. When placing a piece on a track, place it in the lowest numbered empty box on that track. Leverage can be placed on one of two sides of the economy track. You're going to work, see there's ones here. You're going to work your way towards the middle as the coalition to try to stabilize the economy. The radicals do something else. Whenever returning a piece to the holding box, return it to any track or faction mat that has at least one empty holding box of the appropriate type. When returning a piece to a track that has more than one empty box, return it to the highest numbered empty holding box on the track or faction. In the reverse order that the piece was removed. Yeah. So it's kind of a stack, I think, right? So if all of these are gone and this got replaced, I don't know if that can happen. It would go back here, like if all of these had been taken and then one is taken back, it would go in this box. It goes to the highest. It was taken in the lowest. It works like a stack. Okay, sure. Let's talk about the faction mats. We've talked about most of what's on the faction mat. Unity is something that moves on its own rules. I don't know if it's by cards. I don't think there's an action that just allows you to. You can increase the unity, but it costs you something big. Middle class sympathies. Okay. And the coalition may not place a reform when unity is fragile. And that is spelled out here. Unfortunately, the counter fills the space. Okay. But they can place a reform when unity is either sound or strong. However, the difference between sound and strong is how many reforms you need to win the game if you've placed your sudden victory. The KPD has an internal stance, which again, that can be moved. I'm not sure I see it. Change stance. You can shift it one box in either direction as an action. And this affects how much of your pieces you have. The more volatile and more revolutionary you are, the more shit you get. The pragmatic box. Hold on. Maybe I'm wrong. Hold on. Am I mistaking this? Any markers located above or below the stance are available to the KPD, as are any markers above or below boxes between the stance and the pragmatic box. Maybe you have to be Democratic to get the cadres? I didn't think that was the case. Yeah. So if I'm over here on the revolutionary side, like here, I can take these, and I can take these, I guess. But I can't take those cadres. That's interesting. That's not what I thought it was. I bet you it's the same with the Nazis. That is not what I thought it was. When a cadre is returned, return it to the highest numbered empty available cadre box. That's a 2. That's a 1. Yeah. So this is the harder one to get. Okay. So cadres, to get cadres on the board, you have to participate in the democracy. This is kind of interesting. I did not realize that. Okay. The NSDAP works any markers below the stance as well as any markers below boxes between the stance and the pragmatic box. Again, the pragmatic is the center. So yeah, if I'm all the way over here, I can use these counters. But in order to use the cadres, I have to push myself towards Democratic. Yep. Interesting. The RC, how am I doing battery-wise? Not well. Tracks the economic influence of the faction. Leverage on the economic influence becomes available immediately. And then it opens up the things below it. Additionally, any conservative click assassination or putsch. Yeah. And these guys up here are available. Anything in here is available. That pretty much fills everyone's functionality. What do these have on the back? Okay. Those are the unflipped, like those don't look like they're coalition. All right. We're going to pause here and go to the leverage in a little bit. Maybe a lot bit. Went outside. It's like, I don't know, probably around 2. Just as it's starting to get to the hot part of the day, which is here goes late in the evening, honestly. But it's oppressively hot out there. Just hauling my garbage can down, back up. I'm feeling a little taxed by it. I'm glad I didn't have to go shopping. The heat does so much different. Before I went to sleep, I caught the sunrise, which is pretty common for me. And I had one of the best experiences of a sunrise in a long time. It was a pretty enough one. It wasn't spectacular, but I got to see the fog rise into the sunrise. And it created these, I don't know, the mind state I was in was weird because I was overly tired. But also my senses were really enhanced at the same time. And I got to see these little swirling things of the fog that looked like little tornadoes, but then like if my focus shifted, it kind of looked like the aurora borealis. It was just really, really beautiful. Anyway, let us keep working on the rules. For whatever reason, I had to say what I had to say there. And now I need to relight my pipe and have some coffee. Leverage markers represent, I guess, political, but more economic options that are available. I don't know. They do let us know this somewhere, but So using sway to change perception of the government within the populace. Now, these are opened up by this. There are some available anyway, I think. I'm not sure. I don't see them outside the deals. Oh, the radical conservatives have, yeah, they can do it just through, they can be placed on either side of the economy track. Now, yellow leverage markers are placed on the lowest numbered piece there can be in, and they serve as a backstop on the movement of the economy marker. It may not move beyond the yellow leverage marker that's closest to stable. So, you know, if you're worried about hyperinflation, you can boost it up to here, and you're guaranteed that you won't have it. It's a very powerful capability. However, during the decline, it can never shift further left than the rightmost of the dollar dependency things, and that takes precedence. So, if you put any dollar dependency out there, you will not have a stable economy. The black leverage markers work as blocks to the yellow ones on the economic track. Black leverage markers are also placed on the lowest number empty leverage box on either the left or right. But unlike coalition, they don't affect the economy itself. They just prevent the coalition from placing yellow markers on that side of the track. So, like I said, they're kind of destroying the economy, essentially, by refusing to, you know, allow whatever kind of reforms to the economic situation the coalition is trying to do. But that's not the only place leverage can go. It can also go here on the progress track. And the reaction side as well. The yellow ones are placed on the progress track. The black ones are placed on the reaction track. Again, they go in the lowest numbered box. And what they do is they limit how high the progress and the reaction can go. The progress level can never be higher than the leverage, the highest leverage that yellow has. I think this is the same with and likewise reaction has the same situation. This marker cannot go higher. By the way, these markers are weird. They have another side which just says what they are. I like the pictures. Same thing with these. These have a side which tells you what they are and where they go a little better. But likewise, these control markers, you could flip them over, and they have a more wordy version. There was something... This is a supremacy marker that has something on the other side. There was something that, like, had me convinced it's different. Not the controls. Wondering what. These are supremacies? I don't know. I thought there was something that, I mean, stance is the same on both sides. That says victory on it. I don't know. I thought there was something that had a more shocking... You know, this says Reichwehr on it. These spell it out. I seem to be going with the images everywhere. I thought I had chosen something where I didn't go with the image. I didn't think that had anything on it. Right, I don't know. Anyway. So, That's the limitation to advancing progress or reaction, is based on the leverage you have there. Now, we haven't gotten to the track itself, so we'll talk about that in a bit. Leverage can also be placed directly on spaces in the map, and this will affect assaults, regional elections. Can I hold erection? Leverage in a space can be removed during clean slates, and the Coalition and RC have remove leverage actions, and the Communist place strike action can remove them as well, as can some events. Whenever it's removed in reverse order from the highest occupied leverage box going downward, and it's removed to an empty leverage holding box. I think those leverage holding boxes are to some extent at the discretion of the person removing the counter. So for example, I could put it back here on the USSR deals, or I could put it back here on the radical conservatives. But I have to put it on, again, sort of a stack order, sort of the reverse of how they went in. The economic track. Okay, the economy track contains some interesting values to it, which are spelled out. Up here is the number of cubes that the KPD and the Nazis are able to place or remove when they do influence actions. So the worse the economy is towards unemployment, the more power they have politically. I'm looking for this other thing. Down on the other side is the effect on the coalition. The coalition can't place influence unless it's in this zone. They can't place it here. And worse, each time you hit the advanced timeline step, I don't know where that is. There it is. Each time you hit the advanced timeline step, if it's in the hyperinflation spot, they actually lose an influence somewhere on the board. Now, I'm guessing it's the momentum player who gets to choose where that gets removed, not the coalition player. We'll see. It'll say somewhere, but I'm not positive. The economy marker can be shifted by the yellow leverage. When you push the yellow leverage, it will push the economy marker around. Just the dollar is more impactful. Now there are sympathy markers above hyperinflation or mass unemployment. Those become available to all factions whenever the economy marker is placed there. And again, if these get taken out and used somewhere else, unless they get put back there by someone, they're in play. They don't get sucked back in just because you moved past that box. Talk about deals in a moment. Still having trouble, I feel like I need to smoke because I'm having trouble breathing. It's strong in my lungs. Okay. The deals. These are economic agreements between Germany and the nation indicated. They are advanced by coalition, increased deal action. And again, these are all spelled out over here. But also by event cards. The Reichswehr level, the number of Reichswehr you have, and cadres become available as the track advances. You still have to take an action to play these onto the board or whatever. It's just you can do it now. If U.S. deals shift onto one of these go into there, and I don't know that there's any way to remove them. There's none in game other than event cards. Those only affect things when we hit the decline era, which means if the coalition can get themselves to a victory before Germany goes into the decline era, it may be worth, getting tied to the US dollar. No matter what, though, it's not going to be good for Germany. What else do we have? Once these deals are advanced, they will never be dropped, which probably means that these don't get removed from there either. Okay. Progress and reaction. These show the progressive reforms implemented by the coalition and the reactionary responses. Progress is increased via a coalition advanced progress track, and reaction has a similar situation. Both of them are also shifted by some events. The maximum level of each is determined by the leverage markers on the track. Yellow leverage markers set the maximum for the progress. Black set the maximum for the reaction, but the reaction itself can never be more than one level higher than the progress, regardless of the amount of leverage you've thrown into it. There are 4 reform markers here, and they have to do with the coalition's victory. They also generate a political value bonus during elections if you have Berlin. The reaction, and that should be spelled out here, +1 coalition PV per coalition influence in Berlin. Where were we? The reaction track holds assassination, 2 cadres for the Nazis, and a conservative clique, and it determines how much influence is placed and removed by the RC. Now remember, up here, influence is impacted by the 2 most revolutionary parties and actually by the coalition as well. Influence for reaction is based here, and look at these little numbers there. They look rather large. What is this? Well, I guess we'll see very, very shortly. Now I'm lost. Yeah, this is the amount of influence placed and removed by the RC. Place influence and remove influence actions. The pieces become available as the reaction track advances, the same as the other tracks. I need to blow my nose. What I don't know is what... Oh, there it is. Maximum number of cubes placed or removed during the... Okay, this is just the whole column. But even at, like, the lowest level of reaction, they're able to place or remove a cube. They're never blocked out. When leverage is removed from the progress or reaction track, you have to adjust the track to represent a legal current progress. However, the pieces that are already in play don't get sucked back in, even though the actual level gets moved. I'll be back in a moment. I need to blow my nose. Okay. Momentum changes according to a whole bunch of things. But whoever has the momentum gets to choose the turn order at the New Year step of the turn, does the clean slates, receives a bonus in elections, and sometimes gets to make certain decisions within the game. Momentum is gained through performing an assault successfully. There is actually a gain momentum action where your whole action is just, I want the momentum. Obviously, it would be better to do an assault if you can succeed at one, because then you get multiple effects. And then also, Article 48 and Reichstag seats both have momentum related to them. In one of its three actions, the Reichstag seat fucks with the coalition. You will not hold this if you're the coalition, because it means you lost the game. Yeah. The Reichstag seats is interesting because it just, each turn, it basically weakens the unity. But the big thing there is, this has a clean slate on it, right? So, whatever a clean slate removes, you got to keep an eye on that or a mind on it, because every now and then there are people who can trigger that. The turn order is simply selected in whatever fashion that the momentum player wants to. Okay, some concepts that relate to spaces. We see some of the spaces have supremacy markers. That indicates they have military superiority there. I.e., here the coalition is the only one with military. Here the coalition has more military than any other player, and that's how that's determined. The concept of dominance is if you have more political presence, more cubes than any other single player. There's no marker for that. The cubes are pretty visible. I don't know, so is the military, but whatever. Now, dominance is going to affect, presence and dominance affect some of the action choices. And dominance, i.e. having the most cubes, releases the political value, the little flag value of the space to you in an election. Supremacy, by the way, the numbers on these are called survival value, but it's really just their strength. It counts both for offense and defense, is I guess what I'm trying to say. You total the survival value of each faction's units. There are units that don't have survival value. Cadres, strikes, uprising, and conservative cliques. The faction with the highest survival value has the supremacy. When determining supremacy after an assault, include any Reichswehr that failed a loyalty check. I'm guessing you include them on the side, the RC, now that they're joined. Supremacy in Berlin is one way that that everyone except the coalition can win the game through their sudden victory. Supremacy in a space also prevents a faction from losing influence for being the attacker in an assault. Blocks an opponent's remove influence actions. And for the RC only, prevents the NSDAP, the Nazis' place assassination action, from removing a conservative clique. It protects your political interests to have thugs. Even if they're ice thugs. Parliamentary control. The faction that gains the most political value in, now they list these, Bavaria, which is, I think, yeah, it's this standalone box here. But it's really in all zones that are listed here. Any city or a region, regions being the colored zones, gains the parliamentary control there. They'll get the card for that. They'll get a marker in the box, none of which sounds very powerful in and of itself. The cards have a capability each. Conduct an action, remove or reform, and then a clean slate in that particular zone to play it. I don't remember how you trigger those. This will only change during regional elections, but it can be lost in Berlin as a result of a single event. I'm looking at these, I don't see anything that directly allows you to play one of those cards. So I think those cards, I think you're allowed to play those cards kind of at will, but we'll hit them over here. Yeah, you can play one if available at any point during your own action step. All right, we've talked about clean slates for here and there. After elections and after Article 48 or Reichstag cards, the momentum faction conducts a clean slate in every map space. After play of parliamentary control cards, those guys, the momentum faction always conducts a clean slate in that space or region. Okay, to do this, the momentum faction removes all strikes, but not uprisings, assassinations, and leverage markers from the affected map spaces, but not from any tracks, with a few exceptions. Do not remove strikes from spaces with a KPD cadre, KPD dominance, or KPD parliamentary control. So if they have any political or street presence that's significant, you're not going to chase the commies away. Do not remove yellow leverage from spaces where coalition has dominance or parliamentary control. And do not remove black leverage from spaces where the conservatives have dominance or parliamentary control. So what do we remove? Assassinations are going to go away, no matter what. Strikes dependent and leverage dependent. Okay, stacking. Some pieces are limited to the number that can occupy a game space. The total number of influence cubes is limited by the population number. If there's already that many in there, you can't add more. You'll have to do a remove action on somebody's to put more in. I like this because it represents the population of the area. A lot of the political games of the 1960 variety allow you to put as much political influence as you like into a state, taking no account of the population of the state itself. You're fighting over the overall number of, the overall population, but you're allowed to throw as much influence as you like in. This is different, and I really like what this represents here. Where else are we? A space can have at most one strike, one uprising, one strike or one uprising. There can only be one cadre in a given space, either KPD or NSDAP, and ignore any instructions to add one of those pieces if the maximum number has already been met. Each box on all tracks and faction mats can only hold one piece listed on it. There's no limit to the number of units, Freikorps, Reichswehr, KPD Militia, SA, Rogue Freikorps, that can be occupying a given map space. Deals. Players are free to make any kind of deals they like, but they're not enforceable in any way. Cards, units, pieces, or other resources cannot be traded or given away, except during an assault, a faction is allowed to loan their own units in order to aid one of the participating factions. The receiving faction treats these units as if they're their own for the duration of the assault and gets to make choices as to where it's lost and stuff. So, During a general election, the momentum faction may transfer up to half their PVs to another faction. Yeah, I didn't know it was just the momentum faction. I thought everybody could do that. In general, you probably don't want to do this, but if somebody's going to win the game, you might want to stop them. And if you're the RC, you might be able to win the game by transferring, if you have a large political value, larger than the Nazis have, transferring half your political value to them might give you the win. Okay, we're going to hit the action step. I'm going to swap batteries. We are not that far. Let me just put this here. So we're going to talk about actions in general, and then the assault actions. That gets us through a couple of pages there. But then these are the specific actions on here that we're able to contemplate, and we're going to have to worry about those a lot during play. We're going to be basically working off of these charts for much of it. Then we have elections left, and that's really it. So, Oh, I lost my page. So we got about 10 pages left. I want to do the actions right now, so I'm going to swap batteries. Kind of normally feels like I should take a break at this point, but I still have the energy to keep going, and I want to get playing. Important concept here. For people who are familiar with CDGs, this looks kind of like one, right? But it's not really. On each turn, there is one action step. You're allowed to do each of these sequences is like a round in a CDG where you get to, play a card and do something. It's very much like that. You get to play a card and do two things or whatever. You have those three. You have those three options. You can either just take an action off your menu, or you can play one of your event cards for effect. Well, for effect or not, depending, and get two actions, or take the two actions and then play the event card. You can't split the actions up though. Or do nothing and pass. If you happen to pass, you can discard an event card if you wish and draw a replacement. If the draw deck is empty though, no one can discard in this manner. That feels kind of weird. Like you could have discarded. Oh no, you automatically get a replacement. Okay. All right, fair enough. Yeah, so you're always going to have, in the first period, 7 event cards that you must either play or pay a penalty for. Okay. In addition, each active faction, and possibly the coalition, can do, if you're holding the Reichstag seats card, you can play it if it's available. Gets to be done once each election cycle. If you're holding one or more of the parliamentary control cards, you can play one of them. Again, they're only available once per election cycle. There's 10 of these turns in the first period. There's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of those cards. So if you're holding all of them at the beginning, like the coalition is, you kind of want to play one each time. Or, maybe there's some you don't want to play ever. And the coalition has there's 8 of them. The coalition has Article 48 in the center there, which is basically a veto power. They can cancel the effects of an event card played by any faction, but that again flips it over until the next election cycle. So you get one shot at that. Event cards, some of them are marked with a little 48 on them. Those mean that the bot would cancel them. So they're ones worth paying particular attention to as the coalition player, as to, yeah, this is one that, like, the game design or the bot design figured they need to stop. But it may not be the best choice to stop. There may be more important things that show up. Okay, the actions. This is very much like a coin game. You have this, there's one of these for each player, and it contains all the actions that all the players can do. That's really cool because you can look at what everybody else can do. You don't have to be passing them back and forth and stuff like that. Components have gotten so nice. And it has a summary of what can basically be done here. There's one exception, or maybe a couple of exceptions, but there's one major one, which is assault, which has a very particularly complex mechanism to it. I think it's covered in here, though. Anyway. Whenever you get to pick an action, you can choose one of the actions from your list. And even if it has no effect, if you're doing two, you can do any combination of action, the same one twice if you want. Assuming that that's allowable, there might be some exemptions. You fully complete the first before doing the second. They have a gameplay note that's a rules note. A faction that selects both place influence and remove influence may not perform those actions in the same space. That's an important thing because if something's overloaded, population-wise especially, you might want to remove a cube and put a cube in there. Event cards has its own rules for it. Reichstag seats, you can play this if it's available during your action state. It spells out what it can do. Parliamentary control cards spells out what they can do. It does say if performing an action, the action is limited to the space or spaces in the region named on the parliamentary control card. Selected action must affect the selected space in some way. That's the bonus action that's on the parliamentary control card. Yeah, okay. Specific rules about move units. They have to be moving into the region, not out of. And yeah, Article 48, nothing too exciting. It does cancel all of the played events text, including cancels of lingering event instructions. And the coalition becomes momentum. And that's another thing. Situationally, you might look at like Article 48 and say, I kind of want to cancel that event, but I am the momentum faction. I don't gain as much as I might. Yeah, we'll let this one go. Just make sure you use it once each election cycle. Even though you were Article 48 on your event card, you still get the opportunity to make your two actions. Gameplay note, this is again the 48. It says ignore the symbol. Yeah, I think I won't. I think I will pay attention to it. All right. Specific limits. A space can never have more influence than its population. There's a lot of repetition in here. It is helpful to me. And I don't know if it's helpful to you to have it. A space can never have more influence than its population. Influence cubes may not be both removed from and placed in the same space during the faction's action step. Influence cubes may not be placed in a space if there's an assassination marker there that matches the color of the placing faction. Okay. So if we look at the assassination, this one would be neither communist nor coalition could place there. This one would be neither of the right parties could place there. Given that they're only the right parties that have them, it's kind of nasty to start shooting up, but whatever. If the active faction performs two assault actions, each of them must be in a different space. This is all going to be spelled out on here. Well, the assaults is going to be repeat it over here. The coalition may not place influence cubes if the economy marker is towards hyperinflation. A space can always have at most one strike or one uprising, not both. There may never be more than either one KPD or NSDAP cadre in any one space. The economy marker may never shift closer to the end of either side of the economy track than any yellow leverage. In the decline era, the economy marker can never shift further left than the rightmost dollar dependence. Reaction can never shift more than one box higher than progress. If an event allows a card to be discarded, election and mandatory cards may never be discarded. Yeah. In-play lingering events may alter or block certain events, certain actions, even those just granted by an event card. Okay. The Nazis and communists hate each other. If an event or action causes a worker militia to be placed in a space with an SA, or vice versa, the active faction must immediately assault the other faction in that space. If the active faction is not KPD or NSDAP, however, the active faction chooses which faction is the attacker and which is the defender. This is a free assault that doesn't count, and you may not want to. Too bad. Event cards. The active faction may play any event card from its hand, regardless of who it may affect. Some of them have prerequisites. Unless a specific faction is noted on the event text, the active faction makes the choices. May means may, must means must, Must is the assumed, if it doesn't say may. If an event card would have no effect because none of its instructions can be resolved, including if it's canceled by 48, it can still be played in order to get the 2 actions this round. After playing it, you put it in the discard pile. The discard pile is available for inspection. Some events are lingering. They'll go into this box until they're told to stop. Some events cancel lingering. Some events have a prerequisite, and nicely, it's marked on both sides of the prerequisite relationship. This was a big deal for me. All right, short break before we hit the assault action. Change people's behavior so much. So, like, there's a guy out there. I don't know what he's doing. He's fiddling around. I hear, he's dealing with an automatic voice thing or whatever. This is not the kind of thing I'm used to people, like, I'm still stuck in an era before everybody had their little cell phones and everything. One of the biggest ones is people who are walking with a headset on and talking to themselves. Now, I used to get looked at because I would talk to myself walking around. Oh, here comes this guy. What's he up to? I don't know what the fuck he's up to. Anyway, I used to get looked at rather strangely because I would be talking to myself on a phone or just, because I had these out loud internal conversations when I walked. Now, I've seen the people who talk to themselves who are on drugs and whatever, and some of them are okay. They seem kind of like I do and whatever. Some of them are like screaming and shouting, and there's a big difference between them. But like back in my day, this guy's wandering around. What the fuck is he up to? It's like he's looking at my garbage. I don't know what he's up to. Not only did he have a phone, which is pretty normal, but he had something that looked weird. It had a handle. It looked almost like, shape-wise, like the kind of thing that you do, that you spread concrete with or something like that. I don't remember what they are. I don't know if they may be a kind of trowel. But it looked like an electronic device underneath it. And I have no idea what's up with that. And he looked lost, and I don't know if he's gone. He was under my hill when I went up to get coffee. And, I'm torn between various things, like my just nosy curiosity, obviously. That was pointing out the thing about the phone or whatever. I assumed he was just, stopping and trying to get directions from somewhere because these streets are kind of windy and everything. But he really seemed to be very focused on this location, this area. Not necessarily my house, but one of the houses right around here. He may have gone up somebody else's driveway. But, part of me is like, should I go out and ask if he needs help? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I could answer any questions or anything he had. So it like really kind of stresses me out, and I'm absolutely worried he'll come up here. I'm pretty sure he has no business up here, but he may come up and ask, and I'm just like, oh fuck, what? So that's the kind of complexity that I deal with whenever I'm faced with something of that nature, and it like engages me all too completely. Let me relight my pipe. We'll get to the assault actions. I'm gonna have to switch batteries again soon. Choose assault as your action, or if you're forced to do one. You select a space with your active units and at least one opposing faction unit, opposing being someone else's, or a strike or uprising. Each assault action targets only one opposing faction. The active faction can only perform an assault action in a given space once in each of their steps. Faction participating in an assault, and that allows your opponent to move out of that space or to reinforce it or whatever before you can hit them again. The active faction, a faction participating in an assault may use some or all of another faction's units as their own if they have explicit permission. And that can go to either faction, the attacker or the defender. This decision has to be made before continuing with assault procedure, the attacker first. Faction taking control of the loaned units treats them exactly as if they're their own. Units not loaned in any other pieces of the loaning faction in the assault space are not affected by the assault. Okay. Anytime both the coalition and the radical conservatives are opposing each other in an assault, you have to perform a loyalty check on the coalition. If progress is equal to or greater than reaction, all coalition units pass their loyalty check and remain loyal for this assault and participate normally, unless lingering militarism is in effect, in which case progress has to be too higher than reaction for coalition to get this automatic pass. If progress is less than reaction, coalition units fail the loyalty check and may not fully participate. First, all coalition Reichswehr units refuse to participate in the assault and are not included when calculating survival value or removing losses. This is a big deal. These are their biggest units, and it's basically the military refusing to take action against, a peaceful protest like January 6th or Seattle. I don't know. It would be more like the Seattle type circumstance. But yeah, I honestly, this is serious. This is serious violence going on. This is serious street thuggery. And controlled political violence. Okay. Each coalition Freikorps starts on an untested value. They'll be flipped over, and some of them will join the radical conservative side instead. And they'll be incorporated into the radical conservative side's forces, even if they're only like allies in it. If the assault involved only coalition units as either attacker or defender and no loyal coalition units remain, the assault is canceled, but it still eats up your action. And in assaults that do not involve RC units, the coalition Reichswehr and Freikorps units participate fully without needing the loyalty check. But once they fail their loyalty check, and the coalition, I think, has about a third of their Freikorps that are loyal to them. So you really don't want to do this. This is more something the conservatives want to test the coalition here, especially since you can't use the Reichswehr against the conservatives. Once they failed, they're just no longer available to the coalition. He's back again. He went up the hill, and now he's back coming down. He still has that electronic device with the kind of handle that you would have on the Mason's tool. I don't know, man. Okay. Then you calculate hits. Now, usually you wouldn't have a loyalty test, but each faction calculates its own assault value strength by totaling its survival value points of all participating units. The coalition does not include any disloyal Reichswehr units. Next, each faction adds, and the actual Reichswehr is not disloyal. It doesn't have to make a loyalty check. It just fails against the, more peaceful reactionary. It's like the army standing by while their favored conservatives attack a mob. Okay. Next, each faction adds to its assault value strength the following modifiers for things that are present in the same space. Parliamentary control gives a +2. Middle-class sympathies. If you move a middle-class sympathies pawn from your faction to that empty middle-class sympathies holding box, you can get a +2. You can just push the middle class into your favor in these. +1 for a strike for the KPD, +2 for an uprising, +1 for any yellow leverage for the coalition, +1 for any black leverage for the RC, +1 for a KPD cadre or an NSDAP cadre, and +1 for Schutzstaffel for the Nazis. Then each faction subtracts 1 die roll from its total strength. The result is the number of hits they make by that faction. Any result less than 0 is a 0. Okay, we're going to have to do the applying hits, but I need... I'm almost out of battery. I need to swap. Let's try to get this through before the battery dies. Okay, so each faction, the attacker first then applies hits against the opposing faction's units. They're applied to the units first, one at a time. The number of hits needed to remove a unit is its survival value. And you must eat up all your hits. So that you must destroy not as many units as possible. If you have any leftover points, you must utilize them, though. You can select the units, though, in whatever order you like, even if you might not be able to remove certain things. Once no units remain, ignoring any Reichswehr that failed their loyalty check, apply the remaining hits to remove any strike or uprising in the space if KPD was involved in the assault as the losing side, or as the side taking the hits. It takes 1 hit to remove a strike and 2 to remove an uprising. Finally, apply remaining hits to remove influence cubes. Each cube takes 1 hit. Do not remove influence cubes belonging to a faction that lent its units to the assault, though. The only thing they had available to it was what they lent. I think the strikes and uprisings are incorporated into that you don't have control over whether or not they're in it, but yeah. Once all of a faction's influence cubes have been removed, any remaining hits are lost. And then we have a quick thing here. The faction with the highest modified assault strength, minus the die roll, now becomes the momentum faction. What if they tie? It says if any. So I guess if they tie, momentum doesn't change. Remove 1 influence belonging to the attacking faction from the assault space, if there's any there, unless the faction now has supremacy in the assault space. this is the public backlash against these kind of things. But supremacy is you gained military control, essentially, of the area. And people start, they're like, don't want to complain. Might get my head knocked in. Finally, if the KPD or NSDAP was the defending faction, its stance automatically moves one towards revolutionary. Not necessarily a good thing. I mean, at the beginning of the game, these guys are revolutionaries. Okay, we're going to go over specific actions by the different factions briefly. Again, this is all in here, but I definitely need to charge my battery at this point. It's so easy for me to just get myself distracted into something, that I don't necessarily want to be doing and just not coming back down here for a long time. All right, let's take a look at these. I think everything is actually covered on these charts for the most part, except the assault, which we just did. But I'll handle them out of the book instead. So you get your one or two actions on each turn, and the coalition can advance the progress track. If there's a leverage here, you can bump it up. You can assault, standard rules. You can gain momentum. You just move the momentum faction to you if you need it, That seems like a expensive thing because it's not getting you any position or anything, but whatever. You can increase a deals track. Either one of these, you just move it to the right, and now more pieces are available, or whatever. You can increase unity, but you have to have a middle-class sympathies on your faction map. You move it from your coalition to one of the empty holding boxes, and your unity goes up one space. Unity is an important thing, but you can see we don't start with one of those. There aren't a lot of these available. Right now, there are none available to the coalition. If I could pull progress up, I could conceivably pick up that one. Move middle-class sympathies. You can move one available middle-class sympathies pawn to the coalition faction map, or return one from any other faction's map to an empty space. So I could take this one and put it here as an example. I need a moment. I can put a leverage on the map. As long as there's no KPD general strike on the timeline, timeline's up there, I can take an available yellow leverage. Right now I don't have any, but I could free them up off of here. In a space that the coalition has a cube in. If there's any strike there, or KPD cadre, I can remove that from the space and return it to one of its holding boxes, which, could be here, could be up there, whatever. I can put leverage on a track. Once again, if I have an available leverage, oh, I actually have one available here. How about that? If I have an available leverage, I can put it either on the progress track or on the economy track. Then I adjust the economy track if appropriate. I can place a reform. Unity has to be strong or sound, and I take one of the coalition reform markers, but it has to be accessible to me, so this has to be up there. Which means there has to be a leverage, right? See the complexity of it all. All the little levers interrelate. In any one space that has a coalition parliamentary control, that's these, and doesn't have a strike, uprising, doesn't have a black leverage marker, doesn't have any kind of assassinations, and there's no reform already present. You can only have one per space. Sudden victory marker. If that's available, well, it is actually right now. I can put it on the timeline in the current year box. Now that's the sudden victory step, apparently. So that'll be right after my actions. So you pretty much have to, if you just played a card, manage to spend an action to put the sudden victory on the map and take, whatever final action will get you there. So you pretty much have to prep for it. It's an extra step that you have to win the game by the sudden victory mechanism. I can place a unit. I take an available coalition Freikorps. I have a bunch of them available. Or Reichswehr unit. Well, I have one of these available. And place it in a space with coalition parliamentary control or coalition dominance. Right now I have parliamentary control everywhere. I have dominance in places where I have the most cubes. Now I got those by having the most cubes largely, but that's an electoral issue. The other is the current political situation. I can remove influence. Remove one opposing faction's influence cube from one space that does not have a red or yellow assassination with or adjacent to coalition presence. So I have to have a cube in that space or in an adjacent space. Faction may not be targeted, though, if he has supremacy, i.e. the military power, in that space. I'm also only allowed to do this, I think, no, I'm allowed to remove influence. I'm not allowed to place it based on the economy. The economy might prevent me from placing one, but not removing. Now, did we have a place influence? There should be a place influence here. Yes, okay. And finally, I can remove leverage. I can remove a yellow or black leverage from the map and or any track and put it back into an empty spot. Now, normally, I would want to remove someone else's, I think. But if I need one, it needs to be in an available box. So the only way to move it is to remove it first and then place it. All right. I'm going to go into less detail on the other powers or players. KPD, assault. Change stance. I can move the stance marker. One box in either direction. Flip a strike to an uprising. If I have a strike on the board, I do not. This is just Union thugs or whatever. I can flip it over. Let's find a strike. Over to its uprising side. The uprising is a little bit more powerful. And those numbers along there, that's the order they come in and out. Where are we? Gain momentum. Every power has this ability to just grab. Move middle class sympathies. Okay, sounds like the same thing, but they're not all the same. You have to look at each coalition or each faction separately. They can move available middle class sympathies to theirs or return one from any faction. It is the same kind as the coalition has. I think the Nazis are able to grab someone's and move it directly. Like they can steal a middle class sympathy from someone else and bring it directly onto their sympathies. But there may be conditions to that. Move units. Okay, did we have this? Yes, we did. Okay. I can move KPD worker militia. These move independently. I can move up to 3. They can move into any adjacent space. they're allowed to move up to 3 spaces, but if they hit a strike or uprising, well, if they start in a strike or uprising, they can only move 1 space, I think. Or if there's a general strike in the timeline. Then, if it ends up in the same space as some brown shirts, we have a free assault that happens. Place a cadre. Take an available KPD cadre in 1 space. Place one in 1 space where I have dominance or parliamentary control that doesn't already have one. Now, at the beginning of the game, I obviously don't have parliamentary control. I do have dominance here. Saxony, a hotbed of communism. I can place influence. I'm allowed to place a number equal to, or based on the economy track, up here. At the beginning of the game, things are pretty stable. I'm only allowed 1, but as unemployment gets hefty, I'm able to start putting more influence into place. The communists become more attractive. Where can I put them? In Berlin or an adjacent space. Now this is all into 1 space. However many I get, I can only put them in 1 space. Berlin or 1 adjacent space, or a space with or adjacent to a KPD presence, or a space with a KPD cadre. Now, early in the game, I have presence over a fair amount of the board. So I can kind of spread my influence around, or I can concentrate it. Place strike. Take an available strike and put it where there's a KPD dominance and or parliamentary control, and no strike or uprising. There's only 1 allowed in each space. It's good that it specifies these limitations, though, multiple times. Return any leverage from the selected space to an empty leverage holding box. That is not absolutely clear to me. If there are now, we'll get to it in you know what, we're going to hold there. We're going to go look at 5.2. Because it's talking about that. Okay, those are double-digit subnumbers, which is a good idea. Yeah, this isn't going to tell me. Okay. So, I think there's only allowed to be 1 leverage in a space anyway. Let's take a look at the place leverage. No. I really wish this was a little bit clearer. It should say any one or all. One of those two would be absolutely clear. Return any leverage. Do they mean all? They wouldn't have to add any letters if they did. So I'm tempted to put it more towards any one. I might be able to find the answer to this in the playbook examples, or over here even, possibly. We shall see. Okay, we continue on with the strike. If there are now at least 3 total strikes plus uprisings on the map, place the general strike marker on the timeline. Is that this? Yeah. So, only if it's available. But, see, here's the thing. I can't place the 3rd one unless the general strike is available. So it's pretty likely. I'm not sure if there's a way around there. Put the general strike if it's not already there. Then if the general strike marker was placed on the timeline, remove 1 coalition reform from the map, anywhere on the map. Remove all leverage, yellow and black, from the spaces on the map, and from the economy track, only, not from the progress reaction, returning them to empty leverage holding boxes. So I can do a massive hit by getting a general strike. I can really hurt the coalition and maybe the RC as well. Clearing the economy completely, that may be an advantage for either of those two players, honestly. It probably can't hurt both of them. Okay, now we have an example here. Let me look to see if this answers my question. Other things though, I'm not sure where the general strike goes on the timeline. I'm looking through all this, and unlike before, where there's a sudden victory step, here there's no general strike step. So I'm not really sure where it is going to go. I honestly think even though the argument that I made for why that's not all, using just a lexicographical argument, I'm looking this over. It doesn't specify. It only removes one leverage, but there is only one leverage. I actually think it is all, because again, it's an ambiguous usage of the word, but anyway. What was the other thing I wanted to look up? Yeah, the reason is this general strike gets rid of all leverage everywhere on the map. And also, when I think about what the strike means, the strike prevents leverages from being placed. So it's really just disrupting the economic power in that region. So I think it could get rid of both a coalition and a conservative leverage in the same space, if they're allowed to be in the same space. But I don't see any prohibition to that. I could look in the stacking, I guess. You know what? I don't see any limitation. I think there could be multiple leverage by each player in a given space. I'm not sure that's a great idea, but they do have an impact on this. Maybe not. One of the problems that I'm facing with learning this game is it's not absolutely clear to me, how all the pieces fit together. So like, why do I want to put leverage on the map? And I'm trying to understand that. Leverage does generate, but it's for any, not for each. That seems pretty clear to me. I don't think there's a reason you'd want to put more than one, but there doesn't seem to be a prohibition against it. Okay. Place sudden victory marker. Pretty much the same thing, except in this case, I can only do it if I'm in a revolutionary status. Place unit, take an available worker militia, goes in a space where I have dominance or parliamentary control, or there is a KPD cadre. Then, if it was placed with a brown shirt, they fight. Remove influence. Remove up to the number of opposing influence cubes indicated by economy. Again, both place and remove are affected by that for the communists. What's kind of interesting of this is it's not one space, whereas placing influence, I think, is always place up to the number of influence cubes indicated in one space. But removal appears to be allowed to be done in multiple spaces. You can't place and remove in the same space in the same turn, though. Oh boy. I need to plug in anyway, and I need a bio break. It is such a hazy, hot day. Oh, anyway. And it's supposed to get hotter. It's up in the 90s, and it just feels awful out. Anyway, on to the Nazis. Okay, they have the assault. They can change their stance similar to the communists. They can move it one space in either direction. They can grab momentum. Middle-class sympathies, like I said, they're a little stronger. They can grab, for each NSDAP cadre on the map, they select one. Move an available middle-class sympathies pawn to their faction map. Move a middle-class sympathies pawn from the RC faction map to their own. Wait, what's the first one? Move a sympathies pawn to their map, yeah. Move it from the RC, or return a middle-class sympathies pawn from any faction's map to the empty middle. So their special ability is that they can steal them from the conservatives. Otherwise, they pretty much have what can be done elsewhere. Right? Yes. Okay. This is move one available. Yeah. Okay. Move units. They can move up to 3 of their SA. Same rules as before. The strike or general strike in their the strike in their space or a general strike prevents them from moving more than one space out of that. Then if they end with the KPD workers, they get into a rumble. All right. Assassinations. They can target either the coalition and KPD or the RC faction. Now what's kind of weird is the other side of this shows both and will actually hurt both of them to some extent. If targeting the coalition and KPD, put an available assassin with its yellow-red side. With a coalition and or in a space with coalition or KPD presence, remove up to 2 total coalition markers and or KPD influence cubes or any combination. Remove a coalition reform or 1 KPD, or remove a coalition reform or 1 KPD cadre. If they're targeting the RC, they put it on the brown-black side where there's an RC presence. Remove up to 2 RC influence cubes from the space. They don't have as many options. They can't shoot up, well, there aren't cadres, so. Then, regardless of which factions were just targeted, if there are 2 or more conservative cliques on the map, and at least 1 available assassination marker, place an available assassination marker with its brown-black side showing in any one space with a conservative clique, and no RC supremacy, and then return 1 conservative clique from that space. I don't know if there's any... apparently you can put more than 1 conservative clique in a space. I don't know that there's any reason you'd want to do that, except maybe to guarantee that it's there after an assassination. But anyway. So it's an interesting second shot that they're able to do. If there is an extra assassination out. Now, there aren't a lot of them. There's just 2, I think. What makes them available? This is interesting. Because I don't think they can grab that one. I think they only have this one. I'm going to have to look at the availability of those things. That there's one on this track as well. And those are available, the items on that track are available to the Nazis. Okay. They can place a cadre, an available cadre in one space with dominance or parliamentary control that doesn't already have any cadres, including opposing the commie ones. They can put it up to the number of influence cubes indicated by the economy track. They are limited by that, again, the top row. Without brown or black assassinations markers. So here's the thing. If they put the brown or black ones, they can't then create political influence there. And because that's like basically inter-party violence, essentially, because they're shooting conservatives. They can put them automatically into Munich or Bavaria. Oh, this is going to be Munich, right? Yeah. Okay. Into a space with or adjacent to Nazi presence, in a space with one of their cadres, or in a space with RC dominance. Very interesting. They can't do it in spaces with their own dominance. Dominance is the military side, right? No, supremacy is the military side. Okay, yeah, because they would not need dominance, they have presence. Okay. And they actually give a gameplay note that is more like a designer's note. RC dominance opens the door to more radical elements. Place sudden victory marker. And this is the same on each one. Place a unit, put an available brown shirt in a place where they have parliamentary control, dominance, or a cadre. And then they attack the communists. Remove influence, a number indicated, again, upper economy track. Now this says from one space that does not have brown-black assassination marker, with or adjacent to their presence or a cadre. Multiple factions can be targeted, but not if they have supremacy. Okay, let's go back, because this was a little different, wasn't it? Over here, the remove influence. Oh no, this says one space. Did they all say one space? Remove one? Yeah, okay. Okay, I missed that. Removing influence is also just from a single space. Fair enough. I don't know how I misread that. Except I'm good at misreading things. Okay, let's take a break. The RC, they can increase the reaction track if there is a leverage in the location where they're allowed to go. It can never exceed the current progress level by more than one box. I think that can change. Normal assaults, normal momentum. Move middle class sympathies. They can take them from available into an RC faction, or return them from any faction to an empty middle class. There's not the special relationship going the other way. They can move up to 3 of their Rogue Freikorps. These units move independently and may move into any adjacent space. Up to 3 spaces unless there's a strike or uprising. Standard rules here. In which case they move 1. They can place an assassination targeting either coalition or KPD, or they can target the Nazis. If targeting the coalition or KPD, they put an available assassin on its yellow-red side, remove up to 2 total coalition and or KPD influence in any combination, or remove a coalition reform or a KPD cadre. If they target the Nazis, place 1 available assassination on its brown-black side in a space with their presence, remove up to 2 influence or 1 cadre from that space. Nothing special there, no additional assassinations. Place a conservative clique. Special units only they have. Place 1 available conservative clique in 1 space with RC dominance that does not contain a brown-black assassination marker. Why do you want cliques? Well, place influence. The number of cubes indicated by the economy in 1 space without a brown-black assassination marker, in Berlin or adjacent, or in a space that's a number of spaces from a conservative clique equal to the number of middle-class sympathy pawns that they currently hold. But always they're allowed to place one influence from that. Now this is interesting. And note this. Here, oh no, that's the number of spaces. Sure. They're always able to place within one space of a click. Now, they don't get to expand influence from influence. I think everybody else gets to do that. They can only expand it from their clicks, and they need middle class power to be able to spread it out. Place leverage only if the KPD general strike marker is not on the timeline. Place an available black leverage on one spot with their presence. Remove any assassination marker or NSDAP cadre from that space and return them to empty holding boxes. If you're going to put leverage on the map, it gets rid of the assassination. But remember the sweep, which happens various times, is going to clear both of those things out. Put leverage on a track. Put it either on the reaction track or the economy track. Remembering the reaction track won't help you necessarily, like right away, unless it's within one of where the progress is or can be, and that the economy is blocking the coalition from putting an economy marker down on that side of the track. Now, if they already have economy markers down on there, that will stabilize the economy to the extent that they're there, the yellow ones. And yellow is allowed to pull the RC economy leverage off the map, or off the economy track. Place a unit, put an available rogue Freikorps. Now, I have lots of spaces for them. In a space where RC has parliamentary control or dominance. How do those get back there? Well, if the units get removed, they go into the available box. And they're available, the rogue ones are available to them and are not there anymore. Remove influence. Remove up to the number of opposing influence cubes, again indicated by the reaction track. Wait a minute. Is place for influence? Yeah, place influence is actually the reaction track here. The economy track, I'm sorry, I lied about that. The economy track is the two revolutionaries. The reaction track determines how many the conservatives get to place. I lied, or didn't catch it until I hit here. Like I said, there's all these little tiny variances, but they do similar stuff. Remove it from one space that's within a number of spaces of a conservative click equal to the middle class sympathy pawns, minimum of 1, that does not contain a brown or black assassination. You can't even decrease the influence in a place if there's assassination going on. It kind of freezes the current political state. Multiple factions can be targeted, but not if they have supremacy. Remove leverage. Remove any one yellow or black leverage from the map on any track and return it to an empty box. Again, they probably want to remove yellow ones, not black ones, but they may need to free a black one up for other capabilities. And availability is either here or there, not here. Test coalition. Can you remove from the reaction track? I mean, yeah, or any track. Yeah. I don't know that you'd want to do that, but test coalition loyalty. This is another special for them. Up to 3 spaces, in up to 3 spaces with unrevealed coalition Freikorps, flip 1 in each space to reveal its true loyalty. These will remain their loyal as whatever their loyalty is based on what they're flipped. They will never unflip. Now, why do you want to do this? Well, because the only way the coalition ends up testing their loyalty is by getting directly into a conflict that the conservatives are involved in. It may mean that the conservatives want to throw their support in to something else, if they have some, just to force those tests if there are Freikorps facing them. All right. Now the last rule in the game. The rest of it's bots. Is the elections. We're going to pause for a little bit again, just because I need a breather. I'm going to take a moment because there's a piece of information that I don't quite get why it exists. Article 48 and the Reichstag card both have 3 colors on them. Black, yellow, brown. This can only be held by yellow. Okay, by the coalition. This one can only be held not by yellow. I really don't know why that coloring is there. It may just be a random design choice. That's where I'm kind of leaning. It's kind of the coloration on the box, I think. Yeah. That's the only thing I can really think of with it. But it is a little strange to me. Oh. Elections happen on the election step of every round in which the election card has been played. Now, I don't think there is an election card in this deck. I could not find one, which surprised me. Because we're talking about a 4-year period, but it is labeled the crisis period. There was essentially a revolt-like situation going on in 19, which is the first turn of the game, and that's why we have revolutions on the communists and the Nazis. Not that I think they're actually Nazis yet. They're proto-Nazis. As the result of certain event cards, and after an extra election has been called in the a time for revolution scenario, which is, I think, not what we're playing. This is kind of weird, because I think that's this period. And that may be the point. Let me take a look. The time for revolution is this period. It does not come with an election card in it, but it has the capability of an extra election being generated in it. Maybe just to make that scenario a little bit richer in experience and to give people a chance towards a victory that they wouldn't have otherwise. That's all I can think. That kind of thing always worries me when there's like scenario rules that can't be matched by sort of the campaign game. In some cases, like here, I kind of think it's more for a gameplay reason, but it takes my confidence away from the scenario. And in some cases, it's like, oh, something weird and special happened during this period, and we didn't want to make a single special rule for the campaign game to cover that. I think War and Peace may have something like that, having to do with Welchern Island or whatever off the coast of France. And it's not a particularly good thing that it happens. Okay. A full election cycle, there are weird things too, consists of a round of regional elections, followed by the general election. So it really is a national election throughout. When we look here, we have different spaces for them. They're really one thing. Regional elections are held in Bavaria, the cities, and the regions. And again, that's listed across there. I mean, Bavaria is its own state, but I don't understand why it I don't understand what's going on here exactly. The Prussian provinces are all assessed together and have a single thing. The cities, of course, all have their own separate. But, like, why are the southern states grouped together but Bavaria's not? It may have something to do... I don't know what's going on here. I kind of feel like these were all as individual. All the different states were relatively individual in their own way and had sort of a bonding together, but I think they're taking Bavaria separately. I really don't understand. It's the kind of thing that I expected in the designer's notes. Not there. Okay. An election period consists of all the game rounds played between elections. And the main reason for that is when these cards unflip. Okay, regional elections are held in Bavaria, every city and every region. However, if a space or any space in a region contains an assassination or uprising, there will be no regional election in that space for Bavaria or cities or in the region during the election cycle. In that case, parliamentary control is not awarded and no faction earns any political value in that space or region for the election cycle's general election. Place its parliamentary control card aside for now and leave the control box empty. It's now uncontrolled. We do actually have some uncontrolled markers, don't we? I don't know what we have. No, we have no supremacy markers, which I really don't get the need for. We also have a lot of blanks, though, so. Where were we? Any bonus political value a faction may otherwise have gained for that space or region is also lost. Here's the list of the order that they're to be done in. To conduct an election, a regional election, first award political value for dominance. In Bavaria or each city, the faction with dominance in that space gains all the space's political value. In the regions, you total the political values of each space in the region where you have dominance. If no faction has dominance in a given space, nobody gets the political value for it. Then add, and you can track these over here. Then add any bonus PV for additional pieces in that space or region, regardless of which faction has any dominance there. Okay, my battery blew up there. Okay, so each yellow leverage, I'll give you an additional political value to the coalition in that region. Each reform gives 3. Each black leverage gives the RC a point. Each KPD or NSDAP cadre ends up giving 2 points. The faction with the highest total PV wins the regional election in that space or region. Award the winner its matching parliamentary control card and place that faction's parliamentary control marker in its parliamentary control box on the map. Here we have it on the map. There we have the card. They're all yellow right now. If there is a tie, no faction wins the election in that space or region. Place its parliamentary control card aside and leave the control box empty, and it says uncontrolled on it. Finally, each faction adds any PV gained during all of this and any bonus PV gained to their total on the track, regardless of the outcome of this. Now, I'm probably going to use 2 sets of markers. These are sort of the main ones, and then something else, maybe a cube or something, to count the totals in the region, because playing solo, I can't remember four people's sums, you know, especially over something like Prussia, but really anything except single spaces is going to be painful. Continue until the regional elections have been held in all listed spaces and regions free of assassination and uprising. And then it's time for the general election. On the general election, you look at your PV track and then you modify it. If you're the momentum faction, you get 3 extra political. Each middle class sympathizer that you have on your faction is worth 2. And then on the coalition gets from 0 to 3 for each coalition influence in Berlin based on the coalition's progress. The more progress they've made, the more support they get. But that's per influence cube in Berlin. After they get the bonuses, the momentum faction optionally has the right to get rid of half, rounded down, of its total PVs and give it to some other faction. Now, the coalition is never going to do this, I think, because they need to win. The faction with the highest total PV wins the general election. The second highest is the runner-up and will end up getting that other card. If there's a tie for either election, the tying faction with the most middle-class sympathies breaks the tie. If they're still tied, it's at random. If the coalition wins the general election, the game continues. They take the Article 48 card, they flip it face up, they've already got it. The second place, the runner-up, gets the Reichstag seats card face up. It's funny, there isn't one at the beginning of the game. The coalition is so powerful, but after the first election and from then on, I think there will always be one. Then the momentum faction conducts a clean slate across all the map hexes, or spaces. If any other faction wins the general election, though, the game will end and we go to the victory conditions we discussed earlier, which pretty much is the winner gets, the winner of the general election wins the game unless it is the Nazis and the radical conservatives shoved more PVs into their hands than they could handle. Special election. There's a referendum, card 82. This triggers a special election when played. First set each faction's total PV to 0. Then they add PV for each space on the map where they have dominance, as long as that space is free of assassination and uprising and is not in a region that contains any assassination or uprising. I mean, we can do these in order like that. There's no real reason not to. Do not add any bonus PV that might be applied in normal regional elections. Do not adjust parliamentary control, and leave any cards that are face down, face down. Each faction then adds its general election PV. They don't get the bonuses here. They get these bonuses, though. As normal, if the RC is the overall winner of the special election, the game ends immediately and the RC wins the game. Any other outcome has no additional effect, and you continue the game as normal. That card, this may be answered in terms of design because we have a list of all the cards. And I haven't really looked at these because I don't really want to. I like 1929 attempt by right-wing organizations to introduce a law against enslavement of the German people. Suspension of Versailles. 94% of those who voted in favor of the referendum. However, since the turnout was only 15%, the attempt ultimately failed. Okay. That was just historical note on there, which, I mean, it's great if the cards don't need any further explanation. We haven't seen, but I'm worried that the cards will not be absolutely clear, and because I've seen that in a lot of games, and all there is historical in there, and that's simply a matter of, well, we'll see, you know? Okay, Snap elections. And I'm not particularly worried about this one because this one tells me exactly what to do. There's a card, Hitler Sworn In. The event card immediately triggers a full election cycle when played. Conduct regional elections and then a general election absolutely normally. This does not prevent the play of an other election card this round, though. And I do remember this having happened, I believe. Calculate, well, Hitler was sworn in. Calculate current political value. Number 118, the Enabling Act. Number 122, the Harzburg Front. And number 132, Blutenboden. And 146, Butt Plug. No. Good pledge. Pledge. When these events are played, you perform a full election cycle, but you're only checking the NSDAP and or RC political value. Change no parliamentary control and do not implement any general election outcomes. And then you follow whatever instructions are on the card itself. They don't impact elections. They're not really elections, but we'll see what they're about. Extra election. If playing a Time for Revolution scenario, the Momentum faction can call for an extra election by playing an available parliamentary control card. I don't know how this can happen. Like I said, I don't think there's an election in this deck. I looked for it. It was supposed to go on the top of the deck. I didn't see it. I don't know. They can play the Reichstag seats. I don't know that they can on their turn. They can also do it with the parliamentary control cards. Now, it's possible that these parliamentary control cards or the Reichstag seat is handed off by another event, and that would allow it. This will not affect the campaign game, but I want to go into it because I'm curious about what it talks about. The card is now spent until reset until the next election cycle. Hold both regional elections and a general election during the next election step. Only one extra election can be called during the game. Calling an extra election does not block another player from playing an election card. I don't think there is one. But if one is played, only hold a single election cycle during the election step. And the rest of the game is bots. I have to rebuild the deck. The reason I'm saying that, I didn't open up all the decks. I suspect that there is an election card here. I opened up, see, they're like this, and on the other side, they're the same colors. It's hard to tell. Whereas these, you know, are all that crisis period. The golden era is bigger, so it made sense that it's a little thicker. So I assumed everything would be the right color, but I ran across something 148 to 151. 48, 49, 50, 51. That sounds like there's 4 election cards in the game. It says they're elections. I have the suspicion that they may be in here, and just because of me not opening the decks, because I didn't want to do it if I don't need to yet, I may have missed something, and I may have to rebuild the initial deck. It sure looks that way. Alrighty. That sucks. A lot of election cards coming later. Now, they talk about it, although Reichstag elections were scheduled every 4 years, the president could dissolve the assembly and force an early election, and a total of 9 elections took place in the course of the game. We have 4, 5, 8 election cards. I think there's something else that allows you to push an additional one out, the snap election. So, yep. And to handle this, there were mandatory cards There were either one or two. And 26 cards went on top of the deck. I'm going to pull the first 27 cards off and shuffle the election into those, rather than do the full reconstruction. About these cards a little bit. There is a way. So that may be the assures that you're going to get the cards out. If you get 7 per player for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 turns, that's 35 cards. It's absolutely assured that the election's going to come out. In addition, if people discard cards, they might dig deeper into the deck. Remember how that works. Now, that cuts into your actions. What would I have preferred? I would have preferred that they threw 1 extra election card into this deck and ensured that one of them gets put in the top of the deck and there'd be another one kicking around just for the campaign scenario, maybe to make up for that extra election that the that the actual crisis era scenario has. Just personal taste. I can see why they didn't do it, but whatever. Because that would make the crisis able to have 2 elections, whereas the grand campaign doesn't have that. I'm excited to play this, to be honest. I've been excited since I started reading the rule book and seeing, oh, this works a little bit like those 1960-based games, right, where you're trying to get a political control, but because it's a parliamentary system, and I don't think I've done any sort of one of these cube influence games in a parliamentary system of this nature. Democker maybe, sort of, and Der Führer is very, very different. But you record votes based on your political agenda. It's just very, very different type of thing. I think that this is going to be a really cool experience, especially with the idea of the military, the more military aspects of it taking place in addition to the political. Although I would be open to a game like that feels like this, that was a pure, a pure parliamentary system game. Maybe. See, one thing that worries me about this one is it feels like the political elements. I'm sorry. The how do I want to put this? The government policy aspects of it are a little too abstracted. They're limited to what kind of deals do you pull, what you play with in the economy, what reforms there are, etc. And they're mainly focused just on the political impact of them. Oh, a little different. There's things you see on these tracks that then open it up to a little bit more. And some of that may be because there's only one player who can ever really perform any policy, any real policy attempts. And there's no real coalition building, right? Each faction, is its own coalition, essentially. You would argue that the Nazis and the communists actually split, so the Nazis and the communists kind of aren't really coalitions that had any chance of governing. But, you could see something, I don't know, something like the Knesset or something going on here, where, or most modern parliamentary systems at least have the opportunity. And this one did mechanically. And the truth of the matter is, though, there is one player who is playing the coalition of governing factions, or the governing coalition of factions, as a single monolithic thing. And I would be much, much more interested in a game that really delved into the idea of coalition government within a parliamentary system. Maybe with like 6 different players and goals, you know, in ways that like Canadian Civil War didn't really manage it either. It had sort of, it also had sort of composite parties, but at least they could, I believe, create their own coalition factions in it, where you give somebody, where in order to form a government, you'd have to give somebody some ministerial positions. But the whole mechanism for that is much, much less intuitive than the kind of electoral map that's going on in this game. And this really is very appealing to me. Britain, I don't know, during most periods, Britain is really a two-party system. And that's what I want to get away from. I want to get into something with a true parliamentary system, but one where you're making those hard coalition choices. And, you know, one where some of the actual parties are simply unable, there's like no way they would want to work together unless they had some kind of really, really pathological deal in place, right? But where you either end up with a leftist, a rightist, or a centrist coalition, and probably the weight of the actual electorate is leaning more towards the centrist, but that would be like a coalition between a center-left and a center-right party, as opposed to something else. And, you know, what the governing philosophies are would really break, would really make it impossible to have like a far-left, far-right party agreeing to work together. Whereas in like Canadian Civil War, you can do that. Like the Federalists and the Separatists, who are for basically destroying Canada and ripping it in part, could actually form a government together. And they might actually have, the thing is, because of the way those coalitions are designed, they might actually have things in common. In terms of policy, it's just that core thought of, do we want Canada to be a single nation or a bunch of provinces, could actually vary. So you could actually work out some very interesting things where, you know, you have a sort of deal making within the coalition forming in a way that this game is simply not going to provide. But I'm still very excited to see something that is at least working in a multi-power coalition type situation. Yes, yes. In some ways, the same kind of mechanisms probably were in play in things like Bull Moose or Divided Republic. I think even Corrupt Bargain was multiplayer. I only played most of these once, and you know, where you have multi-party competition going on in it. Another thing, and Canadian Civil War does handle this, is that it was easier to convince populaces who are closer to your alignment. So the struggle, you know, between like, I don't know, a center-left, center-right, or a center-left, far-left, would be harder than between a far-left and far-right. They really probably couldn't compete because they're looking to different types of people. Anyway, all that's just me babbling. I definitely have an interest in doing this. I'm worried about it, that I might flub it up on that first play. If so, you know, if I'm still excited, I'll do another one. I'm sure I'll make mistakes. I always do. Don't be too harsh on me about them. This is an exploration of the game. All right, let's send this up then.